Michael Lim joins us every Wednesday to give us a little health kick in the pants. Dr. Michael Lim is a cardiologist with SLU Care and SSM SLU Hospital. Good morning, doctor.
Good morning.
Our fearless leader, President Donald Trump, was reported to be
He's not smoking it, no.
He is drinking 12 Diet Cokes a day, to which some people ask the question, how bad can it be if you're drinking 12 Diet Cokes a day? That's why you're here.
Yeah, well, the answer to the direct question is it always depends. There's worse things to do.
Yes.
But,
all right, good.
I think the deal and why this was a really good topic is I think our president has a lot of company. There are a fair number of us who do become fairly addicted and sort of on this kick of drinking a lot of diet sodas and other drinks outside of water. Like the Powerades and the energy drinks
and the Red Bulls
and the Red Bulls and the vitamin water. That's a great one.
Yeah,
vitamin water.
Yeah, yeah.
I wish I came up with that name. So I think the key is in here two different things. Number one, now everybody's a little bit different, and so certainly people who have propensities for having high blood pressure or heart failure. The biggest problem with drinking all this diet soda is that it's filled with sodium, which is salt, and it will force you to actually retain fluid, and you will have blood pressures that will become elevated, and you will retain fluid and potentially go into heart failure. So it's not necessarily good for those folks instantaneously. So we need to really be careful with that.
So the thing with the diet sodas isn't this diet soda itself; it's the sodium.
Well, that's for part of it, and it depends on what your predilection for it. Now, other people don't necessarily have that big of issue handling the sodium part, but if you think about 12 diet sodas a day, what are you not doing? And so that really probably equates to not eating a very balanced diet. So are you getting your 4 or 5 helpings of fruit and vegetables for that day? Probably not.
Right.
Are you exercising better? Probably not, because most of the time this is associated with kind of more of a sedentary deal, and I need a little caffeine and I need to have something in my mouth, and so I'm doing that. And so I think the second part would be it's really associated with an unhealthy lifestyle that we want to just kind of take a step back and say, well, I could do better than this.
Right. Yeah. What about, as you drink your caffeinated coffee here, what about caffeine?
Yeah.
That's 12 cans of caffeine. How much of a problem is that?
So it kind of depends as well. So everybody is a little bit more receptive or responsive or not thereof from a caffeine standpoint. So I have a couple cups of coffee every morning. It's black. There's nothing additive. I make the joke at work that I'm about as sweet as I can get, so adding sugar is really not going to help me too much. But that the sugar additive and the cream and other things you can put in there start adding calories and other things that we don't necessarily think are probably the best. So straight up coffee and caffeine, probably not that bad. But if you have a predilection toward feeling like your heart's racing, skipping, anxiety, potentially high blood pressure, you could be more receptive to being affected by that caffeine.
When I was in college, and this is no joke, I think caffeine has the opposite effect on me.
Put you to sleep.
I would take 2 no-dos to study for a test and fall asleep. So I never understood.
Do they still sell those no-dos?
I don't know.
Because I think you're dating yourself, because I know exactly what you're talking about, but I'm not sure other people won't know.
There were these caffeine pills, right?
Yeah, this is before energy drinks.
Right, yeah, they were caffeine pills, and I would take the no-dos and then fall right asleep. So I didn't. I can drink.
Really didn't work.
I can drink a diet soda right before I go to sleep and have no problem passing out.
Yeah, I have a similar deal where I can drink a cup of coffee and go to bed. But I think everybody has a different susceptibility toward caffeine. I think we don't want to rely on caffeine as a stimulant. It's like, I got to wake up, I got to have caffeine.
Yeah.
I think that also falls into a habit that's not the healthiest.
Right.
We want to try to do things a little bit more natural and not be dependent on substances.
I'm guilty of going to lunch and having, ordering Diet Coke, and they just keep coming, and I keep drinking them, and all of a sudden, all I know, I've had 3 or 4 or 5 Diet Cokes, and I didn't even realize it.
There you go. So it's the bottomless cup.
Right, yeah.
And I think these are just things to try to pay attention to. And like we talk about, I think all the time when we're talking about, well, is this bad for you? Is this good for you? The answer still comes down to, nobody's perfect.
Right.
And so there's nothing overwhelmingly out there that basically says, oh, you got to get rid of diet soda for your entire life.
Right.
Never drink it.
Yeah.
Can the sugar substitute be potentially a chemical that has some harmful effects? Yeah, possibly, but there's a lot of other things in the world that potentially could cause those. So moderation.
Right.
And trying to tell the waitress, can I switch to water now?
What about
or something like that?
What about the Gatorades? I mean, aren't those full of sugar? I mean, those are worse than anything else.
They're full of sugar and electrolytes and a whole lot of other stuff that you don't necessarily need. And so those are sold based on a concept that they're healthier.
Right.
But the cocktail was created for highly conditioned athletes that need these supplements to replace what they lost when they exercise to a very, very high degree.
Right.
And they lose those things. So the average person, no, we don't really need those.
Well, and the Powerades and everything else. I mean, those are just chock full of sugar.
Sugar and others, yeah. So most of it, a little bit overkill, and falls into the concept of, I think we're trying to be healthy, which is great, but let's try to be healthy in the right way.
Now, if I decide to kick the Diet Coke habit, if you're addicted to caffeine, it's a couple of days, and you're pretty ornery, aren't you?
Yeah, probably.
And you probably get a headache or two.
You got a caffeine headache because a little bit of withdrawal from the caffeine.
Yeah.
And I think, I try to spin everything to the positive. So if you've made the realization and say, wait, I probably drink too much caffeine. I want to get off of this.
Right. And
so you do. And the next day you have a headache. That's a sign that says you were right.
Right.
That's not a sign that says, "Oh, go back."
Right.
so fight through it. Fight on a little bit.
Right.
A couple days.
It is only a couple days.
Yeah, a couple days.
Yeah.
You can survive this.
Yeah.
You've had stress headaches and all kinds of other stuff before. You can survive a headache, and you're probably better off being off caffeine if that was your realization and these are your symptoms.
Dr. Michael Lim, cardiologist with SLU Care and SSM SLU Hospital, always with good, helpful health advice we can all use. Dr.